seen the movie Icarus? Anyone here watch Icarus? Only, wow. Okay, well, I'm going to highly recommend you watch the documentary called Icarus. It's on Netflix. It'll give you some insight into what we're going to talk about today. So first off, who am I? As Adam mentioned, I work at the Canadian Sports Centre Manitoba. My job is the head of performance science and talent identification there. So part of my job is doing strength conditioning and physiology with Olympic level national team athletes and hopefully future Olympics and national team athletes, like some of the group that I work with in here, as well as talent identification. So finding those athletes who are maybe a little bit younger and trying to identify them early, start working with them, and turn them into future Olympians. So that's kind of a neat side of my job. But to that point, so my PhD is in performance optimization. So I've worked with Cirque du Soleil and École Nationale de Cirque in Montreal and Las Vegas. So my job there was really to work with their circus performers and try to optimize their performance through different recovery strategies and training strategies. So really I have some insight into sport and then also into the performing arts as well. So if you have any questions today about any real general topic in line with performance optimization or recovery, please do ask. Okay, the presentation I was asked to do by the Sport Med and Science Council was a little bit more kind of doping control heavy. But please do ask questions. If you guys have questions about specific supplements you're using, assuming I've heard of them, I can try to help you out with that a little bit. But just general questions about stretching or foam rolling or proper training methods, anything like that, I'm going to encourage you to ask some questions because I'm going to try to keep this somewhat tight and concise. So we should have some time at the end for questions if you've got them. All right. One of the courses I do teach at the University of Winnipeg is a course called Drugs and Ergogenic Aids in Sport. And that really looks at a lot of different things, doping control, why athletes dope, why should they, why shouldn't they. We talked very specifically about different supplements and different training methods and things like that. So I can talk kind of all day about this kind of stuff, but I promise I'll try to keep it short and sweet. So who are you? Obviously you guys are basketball athletes, which is great. What are the age ranges here? What's the youngest group? 10 I know is quite young, but what group is this? Is U15? Okay, anyone younger than U15? And what's the oldest group in the room? The U17 group? Okay. Anyone have any multi-sports games experience, like a Canada Games, Western Canada Games, anything like that? A few in the group, yeah. So at Canada Games, Western Canada Games, well, not so much Westerns, but at Canada Games, they do doping control, and you may get asked to provide a sample, and so we're going to walk through today what that may look like, and it's not all that glamorous, but it's something that you guys should be aware of at least, and prepare yourselves for. For the two guys in the room who went, were you exposed to the doping control procedures at all? Just through the presentation, right? But you didn't actually have to do it? Right, okay. Anyone been drug tested before? Everyone's like, no, I'm innocent. I didn't do anything. Okay, so what we're gonna talk about today is, again, those very specific drug testing procedures. So if you are selected for a drug test, what is that gonna look like? And I'll show you a video provided by CSES, which is the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport, that will walk you through that process. And we're going to talk about some specific substances today: caffeine, alcohol, marijuana, and smokeless tobacco, and their effects on your performance, positive or negative. Really, I think there's a bit of a misnomer out there that everyone is doing steroids, and that's not really true. Okay, the percentage of people actually doing steroids is about 1% of the athlete population, or less than. So it's pretty small. Not a lot of people are doing those types of illicit drugs. More commonly, though, we see these kind of lifestyle drugs that creep in. So caffeine, alcohol, marijuana, tobacco, and how they can affect your performance. Okay? And we're talking a little bit about sleep and nutrition and stuff like that too. One thing I want to show you today is if you are using any supplements, how you can actually check that. There's a website that I'll show you today. You can just type in whatever supplement you're using. It will tell you if it's banned or not, and if it's safe or not. Okay? So it'll be a kind of handy tool that you can use. If you're ever unsure, I would absolutely, I'm more than happy to talk to you guys about this. If you want to send me an email and say, hey, I'm using this type of pre-workout, is it safe? Certainly I'm happy to help you with that too, okay? So why are you guys here? Well, this is really the reason. So in 1995, there was a poll of about 200 Olympic level athletes, and they were offered a scenario. It said, you're going to take this banned substance that you shouldn't be taking, but we're going to guarantee that you're not going to get caught, and we're going to guarantee that you win if you take it. Okay, and so they polled this group of athletes, and only 3 of the nearly 200 said they wouldn't take the drug. Okay, so when we talk about ethics, well, that kind of throws ethics out the window, right? Because we know it's a banned substance, but they're saying you're not going to get caught, and you're going to win. So 195 out of 198 said, yeah, we'd take it even though it's banned. Okay, so certainly that speaks to the pressure that you can face in sport from your teammates, from parents, from friends, coaches, um, executive directors, Adam Wedlake. You know, you get all these different pressures on you. And they took this poll even further and said, you're going to take this same banned substance and you're going to win every competition you enter for the next 5 years. But then you're going to die. Okay? More than half said they'd still take it. So almost 100 out of 200 said even though they would die in 5 years, they would still take the drug. So when we talk about, yeah, it's kind of crazy. So when we talk about the highest levels of sport, the truly elite levels of sport, this is the type of pressure these people are under to win. Okay, so it really is important that you guys are educated in this area. And I'm not suggesting that anyone in this room would make that decision. I certainly hope you wouldn't. But that's why we have these types of talks, to say is, you don't need this type of stuff to be good. Okay, but then movies like Icarus come out and everyone's like, oh, well, you can't win a medal without cheating. And that's entirely not true. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So what's your point? Well, the point is really, the temptation is absolutely real for athletes and for coaches and for anyone involved in sport. The pressure to win is immense. And it's really sometimes tough to work your way through those different pressures. So why do athletes use drugs? Well, you can imagine there's a lot of different reasons. The biggest one is they want to win at all costs. Right? That's a major issue. They want to improve their performance. If we start talking about professional sport, there's an awful lot of money out there. So if you want to get an NBA contract and you can make $20 million a year, well, then maybe it is worth your while to start cheating or to consider that. Okay? And I'm not, again, not advocating that, but that is why some people make these decisions. Certainly there's a fame component. You get used to that lifestyle of being rich and famous, and you want to maintain that. As you get older, it comes harder and harder, so you start using banned substances. Okay? Certainly a level of insecurity in the athlete. You want to try to level the playing field. There's often that thought that, well, everybody else in the room is doing it, so I need to do it too. Otherwise, I'm not competing fairly. Okay, and then the peer pressure from, like I said, coaches, parents, you name it. Okay, lucky for you, though, you do have a lot of people around you to help support you. Okay, so your coaches hopefully are not the ones advocating the use of banned substances. They should be the types of people supporting you, saying, don't do it, and educating you in these areas. You've got people like me, physiologists and strength coaches, hopefully that you're working with, who can help you out. Okay, there's a lot of bad ones out there too, but hopefully you're working with someone who is ethical and good and not giving you bad advice. You know, there's your mission staff if you ever go to a games experience. So those who went to Canada Games are well aware of the mission staff who are there to support you as well. Your athletic therapists, your physios, your team doctors, you name it. Okay, there should be a lot of people in there trying to support you to make sure that you're making the right decisions. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, really the idea that everyone is using steroids and juicing, it's just really not true. Not everyone there is pumping themselves full of EPO and things like that. The real issue that we face in sport is the lifestyle types of drugs. Okay, we talk about alcohol and caffeine. I mean, by show of hands here, how many people have had caffeine before? Okay, so that's why we talk about it. How many people here have done anabolic steroids? I'm just kidding, don't ask. If you have, don't put your hand up. I'm hoping it's 0, okay? It should be 0. If it isn't, we've got a major issue here. Okay, the point is, though, lots of people are doing things like caffeine. Very few are doing steroids. So if we can try to educate you on the things that people are doing, we're going to be way better off. Okay, so we're going to look at all of these different substances through this scope or through this lens. Okay, so when we're evaluating the criteria for whether or not we should use a substance, we want to look at it through this scope here. So we want to determine, does it promote fair play in sport? So if I use this substance, am I gaining an unfair advantage over my opponents? So that's the fair play component. Is it legal? Okay, so currently, if you use marijuana, well, it's an illicit, illegal drug, so you shouldn't be using it. Okay, the legality of that is changing now. Performance, does it have a performance-enhancing effect? And for me, as a strength coach and physiologist, this is really the primary question that I answer, or I ask is this going to benefit performance? And if it isn't, why on earth would I be taking it? Okay, and as an athlete, that should be one of the key things you look at as well. Is this actually going to help me or not? And if it's not going to help me get to where I want to be, why on earth would I take it? Okay, and then all these other things too. So is there a health component? Is it going to make me sick? Is it going to put potentially my life in jeopardy in the long term? Do I require a medical exemption? So anyone here have asthma? Okay, so if you use an inhaler, okay, you technically need a medical exemption if you go to a Canada Games, because some people will misuse inhalers for performance enhancement, even if they don't need it. Okay, so we're going to talk about medical exemptions as well. Okay, is there a safety component? And certainly, is there a financial component? If it's going to cost me $100,000 to do this, is it worth my while? Can I even afford it? I guess would be the more realistic question. Okay, so let's do a very simple example. So let's talk about multivitamins. Who here takes multivitamins? No one? Did you guys get out of the house? There we go. Oh, Marcus, there we go. Okay, so we got one guy here who's taking multivitamins. So let's look at it through the scope. So let's talk about fair play. Does the use of a multivitamin promote or inhibit fair play? Is it unfair to your opponents if you're taking a multivitamin? No, of course not. So we get a big check mark there. Okay. Is it illegal to use multivitamins? No, it's not. So we get a nice check mark there. Is it going to help your performance? I would say probably not. If you have a deficiency in something and it's going to pump you up to optimize your health, perhaps. So we'll say there's a bit of a gray there. So maybe we'll give a straight arrow. What about health? Is it bad for your health to use a multivitamin? No, there's no harm in it unless you're taking an entire thing of Flintstones every day. I don't want to do that. Medical, same sort of thing. You don't need a medical exemption if you're going to use Flintstone vitamins. Safety, it's not putting you at risk, again, unless you're overusing. And finances, they're very cheap to buy a little thing from Costco or whatever it is. Okay, so overall, we would say it's probably okay to be using multivitamins, okay? So now, we'll talk about caffeine. So most people in the room here have used caffeine before, probably in the form of like a Monster energy drink. Anyone do those types of things, Monsters or Red Bulls? Show of hands. One, I don't believe that at all. Okay, I'm sure many of you do. Okay, so caffeine, method of administration, typically it's going to come in the form of some sort of a drink, like a coffee or a tea or a Monster or a Red Bull or whatever else is out there. But you can actually take caffeine pills as well and caffeine little supplements. If anyone here is running a race tomorrow in the marathon, like a 10K, 5K, anyone doing that? Everyone's too busy with basketball? You are? What are you doing? The relay, good for you. Okay, how many miles are you running? Do you know? Good, yes, good call. That's the way to do it. Okay, so sometimes you're going to see if people are running marathons, you'll get like goos. Have you ever heard of that? Goo, these little packets. They're like kind of syrupy, but they pump them full of caffeine too, and that can actually help your performance. So might be something to consider. Typically, we're talking about an average dose of about 200 milligrams. That's typically what we expect when we're ingesting caffeine. Okay, so what does it do? Well, caffeine is a mild central nervous system stimulant, so it's going to heighten your basic arousal, your awareness, and mental focus is really what it's meant to do. But it can also help reduce something called your RPE. Does anyone know what RPE is? Rating of perceived exertion. So how hard, you perceive your effort to be. So if you pump yourself full of caffeine, you might be working really hard, but you might feel like you're not working quite as hard. Okay, and your perception of pain. So maybe you're struggling at the end of your relay. It's really hot tomorrow, you're bagged, but you take some caffeine and all of a sudden you feel a little bit better and it's not so bad. Okay, and does it actually increase your strength? No, it doesn't, but there's that perception that it makes you stronger. Okay, and it also has importantly, though, this is important to remember, it has a diuretic effect, which makes you pee. That's what that means. Diuretic means urine promoting, okay? So it's going to make you pee, and it could promote dehydration. So if you are taking caffeine, something to be aware of is to be drinking extra water, because it might help you pee and dehydrate you. And if you're dehydrated, does anyone know the stats on dehydration? If you're dehydrated, how much do you think it can affect your performance? Quite a significant amount. If you're dehydrated by only 2 or 3%, it can dramatically affect performance. So something to consider, if you're using caffeine, make sure you are maintaining your hydration. Okay, so of these, which would you suggest has the most caffeine in it? Who thinks Red Bull? Put your hand up. Couple, who thinks Monster energy drinks? Okay, who's going to guess the goos I was telling you about for marathon racing? No fans of goo? Who says the NOS on the right there? On my right. Okay, we got one. And who thinks it's Starbucks? Okay, so we got a mixed bag here. Okay, here's what we got. So Red Bull, you're looking at about 80 milligrams. Okay, so Red Bull is actually fairly innocuous when we talk about caffeine consumption. We said an average dose can be about 200 milligrams. And Red Bull is actually only about 80, so not terrible. Okay, NOS about 200, so that's kind of your average. Monster about 240. Look at Starbucks, 330. Starbucks is the big winner there, and the goo's only 40. So it's kind of funny because I often hear parents say, well, they'll see a kid drinking Red Bull. Oh, they shouldn't be drinking that. It's really bad for them. And the parents just sucking back on the Starbucks. So it's kind of funny. We see that a lot. But so Starbucks, you might be overdoing it a little bit because we're talking about average dosages of about 200. A Starbucks is about 330. So it can be pumped full of caffeine there. So something to consider. Also, your own personal tolerance for caffeine is really, really important. Okay, so regular dosing really hasn't been proven to be performance inhibiting at all. it's actually a good thing. Caffeine can be performance enhancing. Okay, can help with mental focus, mental acuity, your attention, again, those RPE scales. There might be some benefit to using caffeine, for sure, especially late in a game, late in a race, something like that, to help you maintain your focus and your energy. A use of a small amount of caffeine is probably a good thing. You've got to be aware, though, of the dosage. So if you take a high dose, that can be a major problem. It can pump your heart rate up, can develop like tremors, cause anxiety, headaches, GI issues, so like stomach type issues. You definitely don't want to be having those sorts of issues when you're competing. And the other thing to consider is your own tolerance for it. So if you're someone who has never used caffeine before, and you're in the final of the Canada Games, and the team's looking lethargic, and the coach goes and grabs the team a bunch of Starbucks, probably not a good idea. Okay, you're going to be very jittery, probably feeling a bit sick. So if you are going to use caffeine, start with very small dosages, and try it out in practice. Make sure that you can tolerate that for your stomach, and then you can kind of work towards that in competition. Okay, so the use of caffeine, really not a bad thing, and it is not banned in or out of competition. So caffeine is really widely used. If you ever watch like an Olympic marathon, you will constantly see people sucking back these gummies or like those little goo packs. It's really commonplace and used in a lot of different sports. When I worked with Soccer Canada, at halftime we would give the ladies caffeine supplement, and we saw some good results from doing that. Okay, so in summary, what do we think about caffeine? Fair play, does the use of caffeine really promote or inhibit fair play? I don't think there's anything unfair about using caffeine. Everyone's got access to it. It's relatively affordable. So it doesn't really hurt fair play. Excuse me, is it illegal to use? No, we said it's not banned in or out, and it's certainly not against the law, so we got no issues there. Does it inhibit or enhance your performance? What did we say? Could help it, right? It might be able to enhance your performance a little bit in some areas. Any health issues that we need to be aware of? What did we talk about? Yeah, just your dosage, right? Be careful of that. Understand your own tolerance for it, and then you should be fine. So no real medical issues there. You don't need an exemption for it. No safety issues, really. And the finances of it, well, Starbucks is overpriced. That's no question. But other than that, nothing really to worry about there. So caffeine, I think we can kind of say, let's give it the check mark. It's okay to use. Okay, what about alcohol? So there we go. So alcohol clearly is a recreational drug, and the key thing here, there's no real intended purpose for enhancing performance. So everybody understands that alcohol, there's no real purpose to doing it, and yet it is the most commonly used thing outside of caffeine. Okay? Caffeine being the most, alcohol would be the second most used in sport. And here's the numbers. So at the Canada Games level, here's what we're looking at. So when we're talking Canada Games, it can be anywhere from, we can get really young athletes as young as 11, but that's not who we're talking about here. This would be kind of in the 16 to 18 range, 16 to 21 range. So this is what we're looking at. For weekly usage of binge drinking, so suggesting they're having 5 or more drinks in one night, on a weekly basis, we get about 26% of Canada Games athletes doing that. That's a pretty huge amount. And then wait till we get to my sport growing up, hockey. So we go to almost 60%. So 60% of those aged athletes are saying that they binge drink once a week. Okay, now some of you might think, well, who cares, it's once a week. That's what weekends are for. Fair enough. Okay, but I'm going to suggest to you, if you want to be a high-performance athlete, there's some major costs that come with that. We're going to talk about that in a second. So what does alcohol do to your performance? Well, there's a whole host of things, but I'm going to highlight the ones that I thought were most relevant for basketball. So alcohol, for sure, inhibits your reaction time. So it's going to make your reaction time worse. So clearly, that's going to hurt your performance. It decreases your hand-eye coordination, decreases your accuracy and balance. Okay, so for free throwing, I imagine that would be an important thing. Decreases your grip strength, decreases your jump height, decreases your 200 and 400 meter run performance. And I think you guys run in basketball, from what I remember. Not that I'm an expert. And faster fatigue during high-intensity exercise. Okay, so all of these things are extremely relevant to basketball, and we're saying that if you ingest alcohol, it's going to hurt your performance. And yet athletes continue to do it, which is an interesting thing. So here's the major issue with alcohol, is really if you binge drink and you get a hangover, okay, you're giving yourself what we call a self-imposed flu. And what ends up happening with that is for 2 days after you do that, your performance is impaired. You may feel like you're fine after maybe the morning you're sick and then you're okay in the afternoon, but really, physiologically speaking, you're actually down for 2 days. Okay, so let's say you do that weekly, and we said for hockey, 60% of them are doing it weekly. So we take 52 weeks in a year times 2 days, that's 104 days out of the year where you're not at your best. So 104 out of 365. So nearly a third of your year, you're performing at a suboptimal level. And if your goal is to make a national team or to make the NBA or get a college scholarship, and you're competing against other people in the room who aren't doing this, you've given them a 33% advantage over you because you're tanking it for a third of the year. So really dramatic effect here. And I think that's where people misunderstand alcohol is they think, okay, I can drink on a Friday night, I'll be fine by Saturday for my game. That's completely not true. You're down for 2 days. Okay, so really don't give your opponents that benefit just by being stupid and making a bad decision, right? Okay, the other issues we need to be aware of, certainly with overuse for alcohol, motor vehicle accidents, okay, very, very prevalent. Injuries while drunk, okay, if you're drunk, your coordination, focus, all these different things is tanked. Certainly there's a risk of falls and falling down the stairs and clumsy injuries like that. And it really does dramatically affect your sleep. Okay, completely changes your sleep architecture, so how well you sleep, and that can have huge effects on your performance. And I'll bore you with the detail here because my PhD covered sleep a little bit. There was actually a study done to show the effects of sleep deprivation and sleep extension on basketball performers. And just by increasing your sleep by 2 hours a night, people's free throw accuracy went up by 10%. They didn't do anything else. They didn't practice at all. All they did was slept for 2 more hours. And dramatically, across the entire study, improved by 10%. So something to consider. So if you're not sleeping well and you're drinking a lot, well, big problems there. Okay, caloric overconsumption. Okay, you've seen this in TV and movies, I'm sure many times, is what do people do at 2 a.m. when they're drunk? They hit McDonald's drive-thru and they eat a Big Mac, right? So then all of a sudden now they're over-consuming calories, they're gaining weight, their body composition is changing, and that can also have dramatic effects on their performance. I see the coaches laughing, they're like, yes, that is what people do. Okay, and then certainly it promotes hazing as well, which is bad in sports. So alcohol is kind of an obvious one. Does the use of alcohol promote fair play? Not really, no, because you're really hurting yourself more than anything else. Is it illegal? Well, given the age of the population, for most of you, yes, it is illegal. But for adults, no, it's not illegal. Does it help your performance? Resoundingly, no, it does not, okay? Health, well, if you're overusing alcohol, there's certainly some long-term health effects. So medical exemptions, they're not going to give you one just because you're an alcoholic, so sorry. Safety and finances, well, you could certainly spend a lot of money on alcohol. So do we give it the check mark and the big X? We're going to give alcohol the big X. Do not use it. Okay, marijuana. Okay, so here's this is kind of a silly picture I picked, but you know, the point is we talked about that overconsumption. Okay, that's one of the, this picture makes me laugh every time. This is really one of the issues that comes with marijuana use is that overconsumption of calories. So if you're somebody who's trying to optimize your performance with proper body composition and you're getting high all the time and you're eating pizzas like this guy, well, chances are you're going to be gaining weight and you're going to be in a suboptimal performance. So the active ingredient in marijuana, THC, not really super important to know. But one thing I think people misunderstand is this. You've probably heard that if you get high, you know, you're smoking weed, you're going to be okay 2 or 3 days later. It's out of your system. That is true for some people. Okay, some people, they can smoke and within a couple days they're fine and they'll pass a drug test. 100% true. But there are other people who it can stay in your system for several weeks, even up to a month. And so that's how people still get caught. You might think, how on earth are people dumb enough to get caught with marijuana these days? This is how. They think, well, 2 days I'm good. Well, that's not true. Okay, it can be up to a month or even several months. Okay, so it really depends on a lot of different factors, which you can see there. Your own individual tolerance, your hydration levels, your own personal metabolism. So there's a lot of different things that can impact that. So don't misunderstand that and think, you know, you're going to pass a test because you've waited a couple days. That's not true. Okay, so the intended purpose is, again, it's really more of a recreational drug. I think some people, though, think in sport it's going to help calm you down. So it was used in people with severe anxieties and things like that who would be nervous about competition. They would smoke some weed and they'd feel a little bit more relaxed. And so that's how it started to get used in sport, but really now it's more on just the recreational, societal pressure side of things. So what are the major health risks? Well, you can read through some of these things, but the ones I wanted to highlight was the one here that many, many studies show that those who are chronic marijuana users have less lifetime achievement than those who don't. Because marijuana use, the major thing that it actually inhibits is your motivation. Okay, so you often will see people who are using marijuana, you know, they spend a lot of time on the couch watching TV, relaxing, they're very calm people, okay, but they don't have a lot of motivation to do things. They're not ambitious, you know, they don't tend to do as well in school, they don't tend to do as well in their careers, Okay, so lifetime achievement is a major issue. And for brain development too. So if you're somebody who starts smoking weed at a young age, they can actually affect your brain development. So your learning, your conscious awareness, your memory, your alertness, those are things I'm going to suggest to you that for your future are important. Okay, so for practical application of marijuana use, well, it's really an ergolytic aid, meaning it's hurting your performance. It really isn't helping it. Okay, if you're someone with clinical anxiety, marijuana would help with that. Okay, that's why it's really used. That's why medical marijuana exists, is for those types of people, and for other reasons too, like certain cancers and things, but often it's for anxiety. Okay, but there are other things you could take to reduce your anxiety. You don't necessarily have to be doing marijuana. Okay, so there are medically accepted ways to do that. So like I said, lack of motivation is a major one, and it's certainly going to affect your body composition too if you're over consuming calories. It is banned by the IOC, so the International Olympic Committee, and by WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency. So if it's banned in your sport and you get caught using it, well, you're kicked out of your sport. Pretty simple. And it is illegal in most countries. Still in Canada, it is illegal, but we're fast approaching a day where that may not be true. Okay, so marijuana, what do we think? Kind of say it's not going to help your performance, so right off the top you should say, you know, it kind of gets the big X, right? Okay, smokeless tobacco I'm going to go over very quickly because it's not super widely used, but just something to be aware of. If we look at nicotine, look at the nicotine levels here. So in like a cigar, you're looking at like 4 milligrams. In a typical cigarette, you're looking at 1 milligram. If you do smokeless tobacco or chew, it's 12 milligrams. Okay, so that's the equivalent of smoking like 12 cigarettes at the same time. Okay, so I don't think that's too appealing to many people. So this is what it looks like. I mean, it looks absolutely disgusting as well. So just from an aesthetic purpose, I don't think you probably want to be doing it. But it is, you know, it is pretty widely used. In hockey and baseball, we see it a lot. Basketball numbers are pretty low, so I don't think I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. But, you know, it is something that you should be aware of just for your own education. One thing that has been very commonplace is the pressures for teammates who travel to the States to bring it back to their Canadian teammates. In the States, a whole tin, or log is what they call it, but a tin, for 5 tins of chew, you can get it for $3 in the States. Okay, in Manitoba, it costs $26. Okay, so there was actually a high school in Winnipeg that got busted for this because they went over the border and they brought back like a hockey bag full of this stuff, and they were basically charged with drug, what's the word I'm looking for here? Drug smuggling, basically, yes. They were accused of that. So they came up with some kind of plea deal anyway. They got away with it. But so this is something you need to be aware of. Is this does happen. So if you're ever asked to do it, the answer is no, don't do it. So here's the numbers. 85% of Canada Games level athletes are saying they don't do it. Okay, so again, not nearly as widely used as alcohol, marijuana, and caffeine. But there's still about 15% of users across sport. And the key thing here is it's all guys. Okay, and the reason for that is no woman, I don't think, wants to look like this. This looks disgusting. I don't know why anyone would do it. But so it is guys out there who are doing it, and it is typically, like I said, women are a lot smarter than guys, so women just think this is stupid, I'm not going to do it. But yeah, so we see baseball and hockey still does happen. Yeah, pretty nasty, eh? Okay, so nicotine, so the primary ingredient, the reason why people do chew and they smoke and all these different things is for nicotine. So it's that, again, that CNS stimulant, kind of like caffeine, but it is on the monitoring program for WADA. So it's not currently banned, but it is something they're kind of monitoring and watching. One key thing to remember, so if anyone in this room does smokeless tobacco at some point in their life, or is currently doing it, no judgment, but one thing you really need to consider is this. There's a lot of different health things, but the one thing I want to talk about is a form of oral cancer. So this right here. So if you are someone who is doing chew, and in all seriousness, if you know someone who is doing it, I really strongly encourage you to go up to your friend, ask them to pull their lip down. You can do it right now and check. If you have little white patches on the inside of your lower lip, like this, okay, if you've got any white patches in there and like around your gums, that is actually called pre-cancer. It's called leukoplakia. Okay, it's a sign of pre-cancer, and if it's not treated, it can develop into oral cancer. Okay, so if you are someone who does chew, very simply ask someone you know to say, hey, can you take a look at this, or look in the mirror, do the best you can. But honestly, when you go to the dentist, say, hey, I do chew, and they'll know because your teeth will probably look different. But they'll do a check, and they'll make sure. And if they have it, they have to scrape it off, and they have to treat it. Otherwise, it can turn into it. So not to scare anyone, but it is something that you really do need to consider. And that why I wanted to talk to you about it is because about 15% of the athletes out there are doing it, and it can become a very serious problem. So please, if you are doing it, consider that. Okay, so we've talked about a bunch of stuff here that isn't going to help you really. Caffeine, we kind of said, yeah, there's some purpose to it. But we talked about alcohol, big no. Marijuana, big no. Smokeless tobacco, a big no. So what are some things that will actually help you? Well, so we talked about sleep a little bit already, right? So how many people here sleep more than 8 hours a night on average? Show of hands, big show of hands, let's see. It's pretty good, not bad. All right. So how many people, okay, bring it down. Relax. Okay, everyone got very excited about that. Okay, so show of hands, how many people say about 7 hours a night? That's not bad. How many people say about 6? Anyone saying less than 6? Loda? What are you doing, man? Okay, so here's the facts on sleep. Okay, guys, bring it down. So here's the facts on sleep. So for elite level athletes, we want to say you get a minimum of at least 8 hours a night. Okay? So if you're not getting that, try to do things that are going to help promote extra sleep. So try to get those 8 hours in. Some research is showing now that for elite level, professional level, Olympics, we want 9 to 10 hours a night, which is really tough to do, but that's what they're saying. And I talked to you about some of the studies. There are many studies now that show if you extend your sleep to 8 to 10 hours, it can dramatically improve performance across a lot of different areas. So it's a very important performance enhancing factor that is really easily modifiable. So one of the major things here is phones. Okay, so who here sleeps with their phone beside them? Uses it as like an alarm. Okay, so virtually everybody, and I do the same thing, but what I want to suggest to you is if you have your phone in the room, a couple things to remember. Put it on airplane mode or do not disturb. So that's number one, because if somebody's texting you at 2 a.m., you don't need to answer it. You can wait till the morning. Okay, nobody in this room, including myself, is that important that we need to be answering emails and texts at 2 a.m. So get some sleep. So put your phone on airplane mode or do not disturb. Make sure that you have it screened down as well. So what ends up happening is sometimes even if it's on like a do not disturb, and you get like a text message, it'll send like, even if it's on like silent mode or something, it'll still send a shot of light, right? Because you get that alert, and it'll still light up your screen. If you light up your screen and your eyes catch that, it can actually take you from a deep level of sleep and bring you into a lower level of sleep. Okay, so what we want as elite level athletes here is we want a lot of deep sleep. Okay, that's going to help your muscle recovery, your mental acuity, all those different things. And if you're constantly getting interrupted from deep back into light sleep, it's going to change your sleep architecture and you're going to lousy sleep. So you might get 8 hours, but it might be 8 hours of bad sleep. And so you're going to wake up and be like, man, you know, I slept 8 hours last night. Why do I feel like crap? Well, that's one of the major reasons why. Okay, so if you are using a phone, screen down, do not disturb, and then by all means you can still use it as an alarm, no issues there, but that's one of the major issues we see. Try to keep the room as dark as you possibly can. Do you guys know how sleep kind of works? So you've got something called your suprachiasmatic nucleus, your SCN, which is located in your brain. Okay, and your eyes, when they detect light, send a signal to that SCN, and it releases something called melatonin. Or, excuse me, it inhibits something called melatonin. Everyone's heard of melatonin before? Okay, so melatonin is kind of like a natural drug aid that people use, but your brain actually produces that in your pineal gland, and it can release it. So when it's nice and dark, your SCN detects no light, so this gland will release melatonin to help put you to sleep. So that's how it works. Anytime there's a flash of light, though, it inhibits that release of melatonin. So that's why some people, if they sleep in a light room, or if it's very sunny outside, or if their phone is lit up, or their TV's on, they have trouble falling asleep. It's for that reason. It's because your optic nerve is sending light signal to your brain, and you're not releasing melatonin. Okay? So really important, no TV, no phones, those sorts of things. That will really, really help with your sleep. Okay, training and eating, these are really the two fundamental things. Proper strength and conditioning, okay, working with good, qualified people. You know, if you go to a gym and, you know, they've got a whiteboard and everyone's doing the same thing and, you know, they're doing 1,000 chin-ups and 1,000 curl-ups and all these ridiculous things, chances are you're not working with a very good trainer. So you want to find someone who's educated, who's doing the right things for you, who's caring about your overall performance and your health and doing the right things by you, as well as nutrition is so, so important. So if anyone here is anyone here like a vegan or anything like that, a really strict diet? If you are, it might be something to consider, like if you're a vegetarian, vegan, or just have a restrictive diet because of allergies. It might be worth your while to consult a nutritionist or dietitian. just for some guidance to make sure that you are ingesting enough iron, especially in females, getting enough protein, getting enough carbohydrate, all those good things, okay? So really, if I can recommend anything, guys, rather than all those other supplements like pre-workouts and all these things that are out there, get a good strength coach, spend the money and get a good dietitian, and get a good night's sleep, and that does way more than you will ever get from any sort of supplement, to be perfectly honest with you. Okay, so drug testing procedures. We're going to talk about this real quickly. How can you be selected? Well, for sure at Canada Games, or like for sure at the Olympics, you can be randomly selected. Okay, so it might just be luck of the draw. So I pull your name, and Alyssa, you get selected because you're one of the people I know. Okay, so you get plucked out. That could happen. Certainly the result of your finishing position. So if you're in a medal position, if you get gold, silver, or bronze, you will get tested 100%. That's a guarantee. Okay. You can also get a targeted test. So if there's suspicion or kind of rumblings, like Claire here, everyone's kind of suspects she's on anabolic steroids. We say, hey, we better test Claire because we've kind of heard rumblings that she's doing it, right? So those sorts of things can happen, and that's how you might often ideally get selected. Okay, so what I might do just to save time is there's a video here that I would encourage you all to see. So here's the link to it, and it's going to walk you through the sample collection procedures. Okay, it's going to take you step by step. It's about a 10-minute video, but basically what happens is this: you get selected, and somebody from CSES, so the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport, they're called a doping control officer. They'll be wearing a badge called a DCO. They'll come up to you and say, okay, Claire, you've been selected randomly for this test. You got to come with me, and then you can bring a chaperone if you want. Okay, so I would encourage you, if you're ever selected, bring a coach or a mission staff or somebody with you, a teammate, whatever, serve as your chaperone to come with you. So they'll take you into the change room basically and say, okay, you get two samples. There's an A sample and a B sample. There's 2 cups, and basically you have to pee into both cups. Well, you pee into one when you pour half into the other cup. They seal it up. And one thing to remember, and it's really not fun and just a moment of maturity here, guys, is they actually do have to watch you pee. Okay, so it's not something where like, okay, Simon, you got to pee into your cup here, go into the stall and do it. It's not that, unfortunately. They are literally watching you right there, watching it come out of you. So it's not, yeah. Okay, bring it out. Bring it out. Moment of maturity. Moment of maturity. Thank you. Okay. So again, the chances, guys, that you're going to get selected for a drug test, honestly, at Western Canada Games, doesn't happen. At Canada Games, it's like 1 in 1,000. Like the 2 guys who went, you didn't get tested. At Canada Games, they say there's drug testing, but it's very, very, very limited. Okay, so please, if you're going to Canada Games, don't be in a big panic that you're for sure going to get tested. If you win a gold medal, that's not true. Even if you win, chances are you're not going to get selected. At the Olympics, though, chances are obviously greater that you will. But just so you're aware, it is something to consider that, it's uncomfortable. Believe me, the doping control officers don't enjoy it any more than you do. It's not fun, but it is something that you may have to experience in your life, so just understand that this could happen. So anyway, that's the procedure. So you go in with this DCO. They ask you to pee into a cup. You then yourself pour half the sample into this other cup. They seal it up. They send it to the World Anti-Doping Agency, or to the Canadian lab anyway, and they'll detect if you're using any of the banned substances. If you're caught, what's tricky about team sport, guys, and this is important to know, is if one person on your team gets caught, you all lose your medals. So let's say you win a gold medal, and one dude on your team is using a banned substance, all of you lose your medals. So it's not just the one guy, okay? So it's pretty serious, right? You're not only affecting yourself, you're affecting your teammates as well. Okay, last thing, I just wanted to show you this website, guys. So just by show of hands, and not in a bad sense, like there are supplements that are fine, like protein powders and things, but is anyone here using a supplement like a pre-workout or like a creatine or protein, anything like that? Anyone? Some people? Okay. So here's what you can do. I'm going to show you this right now. And here's a quick website you can use that I'll make sure Adam Wedlake sent this out to you guys. There's my incredibly dorky picture there. Okay, so if you go to this website, there's something called Global DRO. Okay, and you can go to that site. You select your country. We're Canadian. Okay, user type. We're going to say athlete, sport. Let's go with basketball. Nation, Canada. And let's pick something. Let's just pick like Tylenol. Okay, let's say we're doing Tylenol, complete cold, cough, and flu. Okay, say you're not feeling well and you're going to Canada Games and you want to check. So you can type in whatever it is you're using. Yep, we accept that. Okay, so Tylenol Complete Cold, Cough, and Flu, so we're going to click on that. And it's basically going to tell us, so in competition it's prohibited. I bet most of you wouldn't have known that, right? Some of you probably would have thought, hey, I'm kind of not feeling so hot, I'm going to pop a Tylenol. Well, this specific brand is actually prohibited in competition. So you would fail a drug test if you took this in competition, unless you got a medical exemption for it. Interesting, right? Okay, out of competition though, not prohibited. So this is the type of thing that you need to be very aware of because it happens. Sometimes people will take like a protein powder that they buy at Gorilla Jack's or something like that. And the protein powder might have some sort of banned substance that leaked into it because it's made in the same lab as something that is banned. That happens all the time. You hear stories all the time of athletes being like, I don't know how I got busted. You know, I was just taking this and somehow I got caught with this. It happens a lot of the time, right? And so these sorts of mistakes happen too is, man, I got a headache, I'm a little stuffed up, I'm going to take a cold and flu. Bam, you fail your drug test. Okay, and the reason for that is, in this specific brand, it contains something called pseudoephedrine, which is a stimulant, okay, and it is a banned stimulant. So in normal Tylenol, you would not fail a test, but because this is the cold, cough, and flu version, where they have a stimulant which can help with decongestion, so pseudoephedrine, you'd fail your test. And then all of your teammates lose their medals because you took a Tylenol. Okay, kind of crazy. So, you know, it kind of sounds ridiculous, right? But that's why this type of stuff is super, super important. So I would urge you really, if you're taking something, go to this website, which again I'll show you, type it in and see if it's there. If it's not listed there, you can, like I said, I'm absolutely available. Send me an email, say, hey, I'm using this type of pre-workout. I checked the website, it wasn't on there, what do you think? I'll either know it myself or I can contact Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport and I'll get the answer for you. Okay, so please, please, please don't leave it. Just think, okay, I'm fine, because you may not be. I mean, something like Tylenol, again, none of you probably would have expected that to be banned, but it is, right? So just something to consider there. Okay? Let's go. And that's kind of where we're at. Does anyone have any questions about any like specific supplements or anything they've heard about like a training method or nutrition, anything like that? Any questions for me? Anything at all? Everyone's just dying to get moving and get the hell out of here? Yeah, I don't blame you. Okay, guys, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I hope you have a great day.